Hello everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to start today's presentation on Mega Goal 2.1. This is Unit 5, titled Working 9 to 5, with a focus on grammar. Today, we'll explore some useful language skills related to working hours and routines. We'll look at key grammar points that will help you talk about your work schedule confidently. So let's get started and enjoy the session together. Let's talk about how to use the subjunctive correctly. First, it's important that we understand the rules so that we can communicate our ideas clearly and accurately. When I say, use the subjunctive correctly, I mean paying attention to the verb forms and the contexts in which they are used. Next, we need to focus on using the subjective with the correct verbs and expressions. This means choosing the right words that typically trigger the subjunctive mood, like "it is important that" or "I suggest that." I'd like you to remember that I want you to practice these rules regularly. Applying them consistently will help you become more confident in your speaking and writing. And of course, I want you to apply these rules when doing the exercises. This way, you can master the concepts and use them naturally in real-life situations. So keep these points in mind as we move forward, understanding the rules, choosing the correct expressions, and practicing regularly. That's the way to succeed in using the subjunctive correctly. In this example, the subject is he, but we cannot add s to the verb finish because this is subjunctive. Since the subject is he, we do add s to the verb finish. The verb in the base form is just the original verb without any endings. When we use the base form, the verb has no s, but when we add s, it becomes finishes. Now, look at these two examples. The first one is, it is imperative that he finish this job on time. Notice here that we use the base form, finish, because it's a subjunctive which expresses a necessity or importance. The second example is, he usually finishes his work on time, which shows a regular habitual action. You see the difference. In the first, finish stays in its base form because of the subjunctive mood, and in the second, finishes has the s because it's a simple present tense for he. Understanding when to add s and when not to is key to using verbs correctly in these contexts. The manager insisted that he work late. This is a great example of the subjunctive mood in English. Notice how we use the base form of the verb, which is just work in this case. And if we want to make it negative, we simply add not in front of the verbs like not work. It's important to remember that the subjunctive doesn't use auxiliary verbs or contractions. We use the subjunctive to emphasize the importance or urgency of an action, especially in situations like this. So whenever you see a situation where someone insists, recommends, or demands that something happen, the subjunctive is often at play. Understanding this helps us express necessity or importance clearly in our sentences. On this slide, we're focusing on when we actually use the subjunctive mood in English. The key idea here is that the subjunctive often appears after certain verbs that express requests, demands, or suggestions. These verbs include ask, request, demand, require, insist, suggest, recommend, and urge. When you see these words, you know that the following clause should use the subjunctive mood. For example, in the sentence, the manager insisted that he work late. The verb work is in the subjunctive form. Notice that it's the base form of the verb without the usual s, ed, or ing endings. A helpful way to think about this is to recognize that after these particular verbs or expressions, we introduce a suggestion or a demand, and the verb that follows is in its base form. So, to answer the question posed here, what is the form of the subjunctive? It's the base form of the verb, regardless of the subject. This is an important point, because it keeps the mood of the sentence formal and emphasizes the importance or urgency of the action. Overall, understanding these key verbs and their connection to the subjunctive helps us communicate more precisely and correctly, especially in formal or professional contexts. Let's take a look at some important expressions we can use to give strong advice or recommendations. You might notice that phrases like, "it is necessary that," or "it is essential that" are very useful in formal or important contexts. They help emphasize how important something is. For example, you could say, It is necessary that you sleep early, which highlights the importance of getting enough rest. Similarly, it is essential that you brush your teeth, stresses the importance of good dental hygiene. You can also use other suggesting expressions, such as, it is important that, or it is imperative that, to convey a similar sense of necessity. These phrases help us communicate how crucial it is to follow certain behaviors or routines, especially when they relate to health or well-being. These expressions are key because they connect to our overall theme of healthy habits and responsible decision-making. They make our advice clear, direct, and impactful. Remember, choosing the right words helps ensure your message is taken seriously and understood well. Hello, everyone. Today, I want to talk about some important language concepts, especially focusing on the use of the subjunctive mood. On this slide, we see several sentences that involve requests, suggestions, or recommendations. Let's go through them one by one. First, we have father ask that we don't eat junk food. Here, notice how the verb eat is in its base form after asked that. This is a classic example of the subjunctive mood, which is used after verbs like ask, request, or demand when expressing a suggestion or a necessity. Next, mother requested that they studied math first. This sentence shows a common mistake. After requested that, the verb should be in the base form, so it should be study rather than studied. This is a key point. In the subjunctive, the verb remains in the infinitive form without to, regardless of the subject. Then we see teacher insists that the project is handed by Monday. Again, this is not quite correct. After insists that, the correct form is be handed rather than is handed. So it should be the project be handed by Monday. This highlights how the subjunctive often requires the base form be for the verb. Finally, I recommend that you talk about your skills. When giving advice or making recommendations about yourself or others, using the subjunctive correctly is essential, especially in formal or academic contexts. To sum up, the most important concept here is that after certain verbs like ask, request, insist, or recommend, we use the subjunctive mood. The verb following these expressions should be in the base form, often be, regardless of the subject. Understanding these rules helps us communicate more clearly and professionally, particularly when expressing suggestions, demands, or wishes. Thanks for your attention. Today, I want to talk about how to use the negative subjunctive form in English. When we want to express that something should not be done, we use not before the base form of the verb. For example, instead of saying use, we say not use. Similarly, instead of write, we say not write. A good way to remember this is to think of it as giving a strong suggestion or advice that something should be avoided. For instance, my teacher suggests that I don't write an essay, meaning I should refrain from writing one. Another example is Ali insisting that I shouldn't use his phone. Here, the key is placing not directly before the verb, which is the base form. This structure helps clearly communicate that an action is not recommended or is to be avoided. So the main idea is to always use not before the base form of the verb when forming the negative subjunctive. It's a simple but important way to express prohibition or advice in a formal, clear manner. This connects to the overall theme of how to properly convey suggestions and restrictions in English. Now let's look at some common ways we use infinitives in English. As you can see on the slide, the word infinitive refers to the base form of a verb, usually preceded by to. For example, in the sentence, I'd like you to meet my parents, the phrase to meet is an infinitive. Similarly, in I want you to cook the dinner this evening, the phrase to cook is also an infinitive. These structures are very useful because they help us express desires, intentions, or plans clearly and directly. Remember, the key point here is that infinitives often follow certain verbs like, or want to indicate what someone intends or wishes to do. This pattern is essential in constructing polite requests or expressing future intentions, which ties into our overall theme of effective communication in English. Now, let's look at how we can rearrange these words to form polite and clear sentences. The first example is, I want you to dress nicely. Notice how the words come together to express a desire or request in a respectful way. It's important to keep our sentences positive and encouraging, especially when giving advice or making suggestions. The second example is, "I'd like you to go shopping." This phrase is a bit more polite and soft, using "I'd like" instead of "I want," which can sound more courteous and considerate. These simple rearrangements show how small changes in word order can make a big difference in tone and clarity. They also connect to our overall theme of effective communication, how to express ourselves clearly and politely in different situations. Remember, the way we phrase our sentences can influence how our message is received, so choosing the right words and structure is key. Now, let's look at some examples of subjunctive sentences. First, we have, "It's essential that you brush well twice a day." This sentence emphasizes the importance of maintaining good oral hygiene, and the subjunctive mood here highlights the necessity or urgency of the action. Next, we have, "It's important that we catch this train." Again, the subjunctive mood underscores the importance of catching the train, perhaps to ensure we don't miss an appointment or connection. Moving on, "I suggest that you try this on." Here, the subjunctive expresses a suggestion, a recommendation rather than a command. It indicates that trying this on is advised but not mandatory. Finally, "I recommend you cut your hair short." This sentence shows a recommendation, where the subjunctive mood helps convey advice or suggestions in a polite and non-imperative way. Overall, these examples illustrate how the subjunctive mood is used to express necessity, importance, suggestions, or recommendations in a more nuanced and polite manner, which is important in both written and spoken communication. Now, let's look at some practical steps to improve our health and well-being. First, I'd like you to take 2 pills every morning. This simple routine can make a big difference in managing your health, so consistency is key. Next, I want you to study the new proposals very carefully. It's important to fully understand the options available so you can make informed decisions that align with your goals. And finally, I want you to stop smoking. Quitting smoking is one of the most impactful choices you can make for your health, and it ties into the overall theme of taking control and making positive changes. Remember, small daily actions like these can lead to significant long-term improvements. All right, for your homework, please turn to your workbook and go to page 266. There, you'll find exercise D. This is a great opportunity to reinforce what we've covered today. I want you to take your time and work through the exercise carefully. Remember, the key points we've discussed, whether it's concepts, strategies, or techniques, are what you should focus on while completing this task. Connecting these ideas to the overall theme of our presentation will help deepen your understanding. So, approach this exercise thoughtfully, and don't hesitate to revisit any part of the presentation if you need a refresher. This homework is designed to help you solidify your learning and apply it practically. Good luck.